Hey YouTube, I've got a Creality CR-10v3 3D printer here. I've really liked it. It's only about 3 or 4 months old, but my main board died on it. I've never sort of liked the way that Creality cheaped out on this board, putting an 8-bit board in it, and having this dumb box that sits next to the printer here, which I've got opened up. And so I'm going to take this opportunity to upgrade my printer and install a new main board and relocate all the electronics to be underneath the printer as it should be. So I've got the power supply off to the side here. Here's the main board and the display. Now, initially you might think this would be kind of a difficult job because everything's hardwired, but in reality it's not. These wires just pass through grommeted holes here in the back of the printer, and they're just zip tied inside. This one has got a screw type terminal on it, but that can come out and be relocated. All these connectors are on plugs, so as long as the board that I get has got the same plugs on it, hopefully those will just plug in and work. The other thing that's annoying about this board is, yeah, it's got the silent steppers on it, but they cheaped out and they did not enable UART control on these motor drivers, and it kind of sucks. I've been running klipper, and it would be nice to be able to adjust the motor current over software and enable some of those advanced features that you get with klipper with having the 2209s having UART control. So I've got two boards that are candidates for replacement here. I've got an SKR Mini E3V2 and a Octopus board, both made by Bigtree Tech. These boards are really not that much different in price. Maybe it was about 20 bucks difference. This one comes with more drivers and has got more bells and whistles to it. Neither one of these boards is a bolt-in direct replacement because of the screw positions down here and the orientation of the USB and SD card slots. Even though the SKR Mini is close, all those are 90 degrees. They're located 90 degrees out from where they would need to be to even be close to fit in here. And again, you know, I've never liked this dumb sort of separate box sitting next to my printer anyways, so since neither one will fit, this box is going away, and I'm gonna relocate everything underneath. And I think I'm going with the Octopus. All right, so I've just been reading the docs and getting the lay of the land on this board here. I'm going to be running these TMC 2209 drivers in UART mode, so I had to configure these jumpers as indicated in the manual here, like that, for all of those. I don't need all these drivers. I have a BLTouch. This is the BLTouch pins there. The fans are already set for 24 volt. I have a 24 volt system. So we'll continue with putting the drivers in. Okay, I got all those heat sinks on. Actually determined I only need 4 drivers because as I was looking at this closer, I see that there's motor 2-1 and motor 2-2 there. So that's evidently the Z's are tied together there. So while I'm working, I've got a sample Octopus configuration file from the Klipper website that's got the pins and stuff in it, and I've got my old config file over here on the left. So I'm kind of looking at that as I'm thinking about the wiring. It's time to start removing stuff. Creality glues a lot of things down, so I've got to cut. I'm going to cut this glue off of these things here, like this switch. This should be able to push out, but there's a whole bunch of hot glue all over it, so I'm using a utility knife and trying to cut that away. The bottom one's not glued, fortunately. Okay, good. All right. So I'm just going to go ahead and unplug this to extract it, and then plug it back in on the other side in the same position. The polarity of these is important. We've got line, neutral, and ground here. So yes, we need to keep track of where these go. Our first challenge doesn't come this way, it's got to go. That means all the wires are going to come off. So we've got TB, this is TB, so assume that's thermistor bed, that's what that is. And then we've got the bed heat. So can you see that? Is the camera in the right place? The bed heat right there. And then probably a neutral. Oh, a ground. Okay. One of the grounds, 2 bed heats, and a thermistor. All right, let's get after it. So there's some glue on it. So I need to carefully cut the glue away without cutting anything else. And let's see if I can get this to come. Boy, These connectors are just right in next to each other, so you can't even really get your finger in there. I wonder if I can... I think I need to squeeze that thing right there. I need to squeeze that. Okay. There we go. So now this should all just come out. Okay, so I've got this guy hooked up. Goes to the bed, plus and minus, and it goes to TB there, and it gets a ground off the power supply. These I hand wrote on here after comparing what they were. Motor power in, motherboard power in, bed power in, and bed power out. However, this last one, the polarity is flipped. So these are all minus plus, all the way across, and it's plus minus. So you gotta watch for that. So this is probably a helpful one to refer to while you're working on your board. This is in the PDF that's available on the GitHub site. Another thing that I found kind of useful to refer to is on the Voron user's GitHub, there is a BTT Octopus pins alias file. This is kind of handy because it can correlate and sort of double check some pin assignments. You know, if you don't use this, you can still refer to it. So bed out PA1, thermistor, you know, TB equals PF3. And so when I'm looking at my my config file, I can make sure I'm doing that right. So in my config file on the left here is the one that I'm actually working on. The one on the right is the example one provided on the klipper example config folder. But right here I can see the sensor pin PF3 is TB and PA1 correlates to bed out, and I can cross-check that in the pins file that I was showing you a minute ago here. The pins file, again, PA1 and PF3 right here. PA1 and PF3 right there. All right, so I've got everything loose in here now. And the last step is to cut these zip ties to be able to pull it all this way. Now they won't come through because there's plugs on the end. So to extract these wires, I'm gonna have to pull the plugs off the board and take them out that way. But they're all glued down. And so what I wanna do is I'm gonna cut these zip ties so that I can bring the lines in, and I'll have it all out on my workbench where it'll be easier to deal with, and sort of, you know, one bundle at a time, I guess is what I'll do, you know. And I'll transfer them over to the Octopus board as I do them. All right, I've got this stuff extracted from inside the box, and I'm gonna go ahead and get the glue off of these And I think a good way to do that is just to grab a hold of it with a pair of needle nose and just kind of pull it off. Looks pretty good. Comes off clean. Only took, I don't know, a couple minutes to get that stuff off. So I'm going to start with the X, which leads into this ribbon cable here and all the associated connectors that are on that. And I'm going to transfer them over to the Octopus. So all these wires are labeled, fortunately, so it makes them relatively easy to deal with. So this is the X. It says X motor. And on the same harness, obviously, is also the extruder motor. So we'll grab that one. So those two are separated. And now we're going to go see what's over here. So we've got some limit switch stuff. So it's saying Z limit 3 prongs. Now that must be, that's probably the BLTouch, because the other Z limit is mounted to the printer, I think, so that would be nice if that's the case. What do we got over here? Oh, there's a mystery. There's a mystery wire down here. It says D11. And that's glued on here. I do not know what this one is. There's a blob of glue on it. It's going to be fun to get that because they got carried away with that. So that's those. What else do we got? In this same harness, we have a heat. So this must be the extruder heat. We have K fan and fan. Let's see if I can. K fan. And fan. So maybe K fan is the the hot end cooler. Don't know. And then we have the thermistor. This would be the hot end thermistor. We have an X limit. This one's fighting me. I don't see any glue on it. We have an X limit. Didn't we already have one of those? There's two of them. So which is which? Huh, great. So I kind of need to know which is which there. Okay. So this bundle is free. And I should be able to extract it now from the box. Might take some coaxing. Take them all through there. Yeah, those aren't all going to fit through there at once. So I'm going to have to do them in sections here. There we go. So that harness is out of the box. So I'm going to have to use my multimeter, I think, and figure out which one of these is which on the X-axis limit. And I need to figure out what the mystery D11 is. Probably has something to do with the BLTouch, but we'll see. All right, so I've been able to figure out that this larger 3-prong X one that's labeled X limit is actually the filament runout sensor. And the other 2-pin one that's also labeled X limit is the actual X end stop. So that's what's going on with that. And I believe K fan is actually the part cooling fan. All right, so here's a weird one. This K fan wire's only got, or K fan connector has only got one wire. And that is how it is. I Googled this, looked at it on the other board, and it's the negative wire. So it's shared with this other fan wire. So I guess the question for me is, how do you vary your part speed fan, because I know I was varying that before, when it's sharing with the hot end fan, which needs to be on all the time, or all the time when you're printing. So yeah, that's a little odd one there. All right, today is tomorrow, and I spent a few hours deciphering this BLTouch wiring and thinking about it. You know, it's confusing because there's 5 wires on the BLTouch end and there's only 4 here. There's a little PCB board under the x-axis here, and where the BLTouch goes in, 5 wires go in, 4 come out. It ties the circuit board. I pulled it off and verified. Also tested this with my multimeter. The white and red wires are tied together onto this center pin here. So the way that they've wired this in the original Creality is this was on the using a Z plus limit switch position. So I'm going to just replicate that, and then this probe wire I'm going to stick over here on the BLTouch probe and configure a klipper accordingly. So we'll see how that goes. All right, so some more discoveries as I work through this. So the X limit switch, you know, as I said before, it's only a 2-pin deal. But this needs to be configured such that it's on the lower 2 pins, ground and the sense pin, because this gets configured with a pull-up. So basically you tell klipper to output 3.3 volts from the sense pin, which gets pulled low to ground, and it detects that. So the voltage to the switch is supplied from the sense pin, essentially, which gets pulled to ground. So on the BLTouch, I can make no sense of these wires, but you know, because the color combinations don't make any sense. Also on this 2-pin X, it was necessary to snip the little clip off the 3-pin deal to be able to get it in there. So the heater wires had a jack on them. I snipped that off. I've tinned these ends of these wires, and I'm going to put them right there. This is for the extruder. All right, so this completes this harness. That's all wired up. Now I'm going to do the other harness. I'm going to extract it from the case in the same manner as the other one, and we'll work through them one by one. All right, so I'm getting to wiring up the screen, and looking at the klipper sample LCD file, I see a warning down here at the bottom of it about some of these boards having essentially reversed pin headers on the ribbon cable connectors, and I sort of suspected mine had that on the Creality CR-10v3. Well, so I did some research, and I was looking at the boards and stuff, and I came across this article, which is some instructions about replacing an Ender 3 with a duet board. And they're basically saying you got to pull these off and reverse them. So I did with a flat screwdriver and just some very gentle pulling. I was able to pull this off, and I can flip it around. I'm going to do that with EXP1 and EXP2 ribbon headers to make them line up with what this board has got. I also studied the pins and ground on stuff on on the original Creality board and this board, and yeah, I've come to the conclusion that I do believe I need to reverse these. So I already did one. I'll go ahead and show you how I did this one. Just kind of get something flat and skinny. Just work it under the edge here. I actually had one of these, not this one, but a different connector, pull off accidentally because I didn't get all the glue off of it. So that hot glue, you gotta make sure you get all that stuff off. You can kind of go in between the pins too. Just make sure you're not putting your levering on any components underneath the screwdriver. You don't want to do it on top of any resistors or capacitors or anything like that. I might just be able to yank it now, get it that far. Getting close. There we go. And then just flip it around and stick it back on there. Make sure you got all the pins started correctly. There we go. All right, I've got everything temporarily hooked up next to the printer. The reason for this is I actually need my printer functioning to be able to print the parts, to be able to put them under the bed. So I've secured everything as best I can here. So the one big moving part is the Y-axis, the bed. And so I've zip tied that there so that that doesn't move stuff around when the bed's moving. So I've got my Pi fired up, but I haven't hooked up the USB yet. So what I'm getting ready to do is the initial power up of the board, firmware flashing, and then I'm going to run through the tests on the klipper documentation. It talks about, you know, all the sort of pre-flight checks you want to do on your machine before you start printing. It's things like checking the end stops and the motors and thermistors and everything, just to make sure everything's working as expected. So that is the next big step here. All right, so I've already powered it up via USB and no smoke came out. I'm trying to flash the firmware via the micro SD card. It's not working. I think it's because it doesn't have enough power with everything plugged in the USB. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on. This is a smoke test here. Okay, nothing bad happened. Got some blinky lights. I'm going to go ahead and stick the firmware in. Reset the board. There is a light blinking in there. I'm just kind of see if I can pick it up on the camera. Yeah, there it is, see? Wondering if that means something. Tried Googling that, didn't come up with an answer. All right, I could not get that to flash via the SD card. So I ended up using a procedure that I found on Bigtree Tech's GitHub to flash it via USB. So I was able to do this from the Pi. It involved, setting a jumper on the board and, following these instructions, and that did actually work. I also found on Gadget Angel's GitHub a really nice color-coded image of all of the pins and stuff on the board. I thought that was kind of nice. You might want to look that up. So yeah, it's alive now. I am going to go ahead and run all the safety checks that you need to do the first time you load Klipper on anything. The configuration checks I'm referring to are on the Klipper documentation site under config checks, and just run through this whole thing. Their instructions are for Octoprint, but if you're using Fluid like me, you can translate those instructions over. But basically, you're going to check that all the inputs and outputs are working properly. Your endstops, motors, thermistors, all that stuff. All right, everything's going good. I did have to change a few things. All pretty minor stuff. Doing some PID tunes. I did a PID tune on the extruder and now on the bed just to get all that dialed in properly. But yeah, I think it's going well here. All right, my BLTouch isn't working. That was the one big area I had some question about. I'm trying to use the stock Creality wiring harness, and it's being mysterious. The plan that I hatched is not working. Not sure where to go from here. If I just had a long wiring harness, I could just plug right into there. It'd probably be ahead of the game. Just bypass all this BS here. All right, well, today is tomorrow, and I got the cable to hook up my BLTouch and got in a hurry and hooked it up wrong. And I smoked the BLTouch. Smoke literally came roaring out of it. Shut the machine off really quick, but it's too late for that. The board's fine, and I am getting ready. I hooked up my old Z end stop back there, and so I'm just going about it old school here, and I'm getting ready to run. I am running my first print with the Octopus board on a CR-10 right now. All right, I heated everything up and reset my Z offset more carefully. Running fluid here with the Pi cam, and we're about to see the start of a print here. That first line always takes a little bit to prime. So let's see. Yeah. I gotta look at it over here. And it's starting to do some of that bicubic fill. Well, it looks like she's working, and I'm going to have a successful print here. So I'm going to go ahead and call it. Appreciate you watching.